Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today my dad is in town, and I do have some other videos on my channel. You should check them out, of my dad's 65 GTO, which he's the original owner and he still has it after all these years. But he came over today and he's got some papers with him, and he's saying that there's a story he wants to tell me about the car, something that I'm probably not aware of even after all these years. So here he is.
Okay, it concerns the rear axle of the GTO, which I did purchase new in 1965. I enlisted into the National Guard, which was a 6-year obligation back then in 1964. And with that, you had to attend the meetings with the National Guard. I had to go every Thursday night, and it was 1 weekend a month at that time, and that's the way you fulfilled your enlistment. I was driving there and I was running a little late. So what happened was I put the car in first gear and kind of got on it and shift to second very quick. And with that, I blew the rear end, which I was quite surprised at the time that would even happen.
What kind of noise did that make?
Okay, it was making a very loud clunk, of course, when it happened. And the rear axle cracked from the drive shaft all the way to the backing plate.
So you're talking about the axle housing itself,
right? The housing,
cracked,
right? Not the
axle
axles.
itself. Right. It's the axle housing.
Right. So anyway, the car, of course, once I got there, at the time I had called my father and I said, "Listen, this is what happened. We're going to have to get the car towed back to the house." And we did do it that night. But what happened was he was in the military too for many years during World War II. And he went right to the commanding officer and he told him what happened. He says, "Okay, fine, I'm going to release him." And we had to get a tow truck to have it towed back to the house where we lived. And my father was in the banking business and he had many accounts that he knew at the time. It's kind of a funny story. Very close to where his bank was, there was a repair place that I guess they had held the account with the bank. And whenever he had worked on his car, he would take it there. Anyway, the car was repaired, and of course, at the time, I didn't know exactly what they were going to do. And of course, the car, this happened in 1968, if I can remember. They did replace the whole rear axle from wheel to wheel. And when I had ordered the car, I had ordered the 390 rear with the metallic brakes. And it does show here in the charts, if you look in the Paul Zazarane book, as to what each axle was coded, and the code on this was, I think, ZK. Just noting that that's what it was for a 390 rear. So anyway, when I got the car back, I was curious to see what was put in, and of course it did come from a junkyard. And I guess at that time, the car was only 3 years old, and there must have been tons of these cars in the junkyard to get this part. It wasn't something that was unusual. So a day or two after I got home, I jacked up the car so that the rear tires and everything was off the ground. And I marked the drive shaft and the tire. And as I turned the wheel, which would be one full turn, the drive shaft turned 3.5 times. So I figured it was probably a 355. Not realizing at the time that the rear axle, of course, could have came from a Buick or an Oldsmobile or a Pontiac. But as my son told me, and I didn't realize this, the Chevy was slightly different, and it really wouldn't work with that. But all the bopping axles were interchangeable. So I have a friend that lives relatively close to me, and when I moved and went to car shows, I met him. He also has a 65 GTO. And he said to me, "Did you ever check what axle code it was?" So I said no. I said, "But I'm going to go out in the garage and I'm going to look." And it was very strange because, of course, the area, of course, as you say, is dirty because you had to clean everything off. There was a code, but it was upside down. And I said to myself, well, why would there be an upside down code? As it turned out, this is what Oldsmobile did. They coded their axles, but for some reason they were upside down. And the code happened to be SJ. So before I could even go and look on the internet, my friend called me back and he said, you got a Nosebile rear axle in there, which was probably replaced. And I went online, and of course it did show that the F85, the Cutlass, or the 442 with an SJ code is a 355 axle code. And that's what was in the car. And again, all these years not even realizing that it wasn't a Pontiac axle. But again, they were all interchangeable back then, the 3 divisions.
And, and it's the one they put in is also a posi unit.
Yeah, and it is posi. Well, that was the first thing I did look, and of course it had the metal tag that was hanging down from the rear cover.
Yeah.
So I knew it was posi traction, because there was also the open rear.
Right.
But I would imagine
Posi traction was an option.
Right, that the repair place who did it, of course, they probably called it, and in the junkyard probably brought the axle, but probably noting that it was posi traction. One thing with the Oldsmobile rear, that they were, if you went, I think the 390 was dealer installed, where with Pontiac, if you ordered it, that came from the factory, but if you did go 411 or 433, you ordered the 390 and then the dealer they would change it out.
And also because you had ordered the close ratio 4-speed.
4-speed, right.
They mandated the 390.
Right. That was one thing in the Paul Zazarane book. It said that you have to have a close ratio, which I have. It's got the original 4-speed Muncie in the car today.
But even with the 355 now, I guess all these years you're pretty used to it and it's not an issue.
Yeah, it wasn't an issue because this many years later, I don't have to tell you, I don't go beating on the car because it wouldn't look like the way it is today. And just drive it kind of normally like you would be driving a stick shift.
I had always wondered about that too, because I remember, you know, being in the car driving on the highway, and it wasn't like the engine was revving very high, because a 390, you would think it would be revving over 3,000 easily.
Actually, the tri-power came with 355 standard.
Yeah.
It wasn't 323. It was a 355.
With the standard transmission.
And then I did go one up to 390. I felt that the 411,
that was too much.
It would have been way too much.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, you know, pretty much an in-between rear.
So that's interesting. I never knew all these years it did not have the original.
Right. Other than that, everything
ratio.
else, as maybe Anthony has explained, you know, the engine has never been out of the car. The heads have never been off the car. The worst thing that ever happened was the intake manifold came off and the carburetors have been rebuilt. But other than that...
And the transmission's original?
Yes. It has never... I took it out 2 times to do a clutch.
But it's never been rebuilt?
But it's never been rebuilt. So that to attribute that, you know, it's pretty good. I mean, let's face it, if you constantly probably go to the drag strip, I'm sure somewhere along the line, you would have a problem.
And the times that you used to bring it, or Uncle Ronnie used to bring it to the track, you never broke anything?
No, nothing, never did.
That's good.
So, anyway, just wanted to let everybody know.
Well, thanks for the story. Now I know what it's got in it, so good to know. All right, thanks, Dad.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, thanks for watching. Please leave me a comment, hit subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks.